Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to get us started. I'd like to welcome you to this second webinar in our CIPD series that's focused on helping you with your career in 2021 within the wonderful people profession. My name is Katie Jacobs, and I'll be hosting the next hour. Over this series, we're really keen to provide you with practical advice and tips from experts and people who have been there, done that, and bought the t-shirt. And we want to give you the opportunity to connect with each other. I'm going to make this session as interactive as possible. You'll have lots of opportunities to ask questions and also to chat to each other using the chat function. In our first session, we explored breaking into the people profession. In this one, we're looking at moving on and moving up. How do you take the next step in your career? How can you find that next opportunity, even during a downturn? And how do you decide what's right for you if you're still kind of figuring out where you want to go next in your career? Joining me to share their insights and experiences, I've got a really fab panel of experts. I'm joined by Laura Walker. Laura is founder of Midlife Careers, and she's even written a book on the topic. Louise Sorrell is HR Business Director at the recruitment firm Badenoch Clark. Yetunde Oladipo, Senior Talent Consultant at the Department for Work and Pensions. And Tim Pointer, SVP for People and Culture at Creative Artists Agency Global Brands Group. I'll let Tim explain what that does when we come to the introductions. Thank you all for joining us today. As ever, let me just run through the housekeeping quickly. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on demand after the session. Apart from the slides you can see right now, we don't have any others. So once I'm finished doing the housekeeping and I'm telling you about various things you need to know about, we're going to be running it as an interactive panel. That means we need your questions, so please do get them in from the start. Could I ask you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if you want a question that you want me to see and you want me to put to the panel. But I really want to see you using the chat function and make sure you set it to panelists and attendees to talk among yourselves and to swap tips and stories and encouragement. On the last session, we saw so much activity and people connecting and networking, and it was really great to see. I think we've got over 200 people here so far and more joining every minute. So use that opportunity to connect. You might come away from here having met somebody really helpful. I want to make you aware of our great CIPD resources around careers, our Careers Hub, where you can access a host of brilliant interactive tools, including a CV optimization tool. We have a careers clinic on the CIPD community, where you can get advice from your fellow people professionals about your hardest career challenges, and our amazing branch network, which is a really great way to build your skills and to learn and to network with other people professionals. These are really tough times, especially for people who are job hunting. So I want to flag our wellbeing helpline. We're working with award-winning workplace wellbeing provider Health Assured to provide our members in the UK and Ireland with free advice from qualified therapists. You can also access the My Healthy Advantage app, which provides wellbeing tools designed to improve your mental and physical health. And finally, as I flagged, this is part of a series, so we've got a couple more webinars coming on the topic of your career in the people profession, so do watch out for those. Sorry, excuse me. So it's pretty clear that the pandemic has highlighted the vital role of the people profession, but the context we find ourselves in presents both opportunities and challenges for professionals seeking to develop their careers in 2021 and beyond. How can people professionals take advantage of new opportunities, build on their skills during challenging times? Should your next step involve seeking promotion or moving on? How can you build up your confidence post-furlough or redundancy? What's the best approach to virtual networking? And could the trend towards more remote working expand your horizons and opportunities? Those are the kind of things we're going to be talking about, but please do get your questions in as well. So I'm going to kick off the discussion, and I'd like to start first by asking our two practitioners on the panel, Tim and Yetunde, to offer some context around their own career journeys. What were the decisions that you made that enabled you to move on and up? Have you got experience of doing so during a recession or a downturn, for example? And Tim, can I start with you?
Hello, everyone. Great to be part of this exceptional panel and a really important topic. I'm very fortunate. I've had a career which has been in HR pretty much all the way through. Sorry, it's just a croaky voice. I haven't got COVID. But part of the joy of that has been times outside of HR. And I would, one of the first tips I would give, and I know that others will add to this, is that if you get given the opportunity to do something different, even if you see your long-term future in human resources, grab it with both hands. I've been fortunate enough to have spells in retail management, in marketing, and it's always meant that I've come back into the profession with more understanding of the business and with greater technical nous and business understanding, better acumen, which helps me to make better decisions. So today, as Katie said, I sit on the executive team for CAA-GBG, which is the world's largest global brand management agency. And that's the experience that I've built up all the way through helps me to sit on that executive team, not just as the person who's responsible for our people strategy, but as a business leader, as someone that has business understanding and experience, and first looks at what's right for the business, and then secondarily thinks about how we can use our people strategy to best build that. Now, through my career, I've been very fortunate to have had a lot of global experience. So I've worked in the US, I've worked out in Asia Pacific. In fact, I lived in Sydney for 5 years. And the opportunity to go to different countries, different regions, and to understand more, particularly if you want to have a global career, to work in international businesses, to build cultural understanding. Again, that's not one of those cases of looking for me, it's not about looking for a promotion, it's about just looking for breadth and putting yourself forward, always being the person who is curious and wants to take on that additional project, that additional responsibility. It shows that you're someone who's up for the challenge. And so I've been very fortunate that I've always been fascinated by branded businesses. I've been fortunate to work with some great branded businesses from Marks and Spencer, where I started out on the grad scheme just a few years ago when I had more hair and didn't have a beard. And then I've worked for businesses like HMV Waterstones. I worked for Maxim, which is a global liquor joint venture when I was out in Asia Pacific, and I've spent a lot of time in the fashion industry, both with Diesel, the Brave Group, Penland that owns Speedo, Mitre, Ted Baker and Lacoste footwear. I spent 2 years with Dixon's Carphone, and then most recently at Global Brands Group, where all of the regional HR directors report into me, and we work across 22 countries globally. So you have a very quick whistle-stop tour there of, a passion for brands, a fascination with how we set people up to achieve things in international integrated businesses, and the ability to just keep asking questions, keep building, keep stepping forward, and I've been very fortunate to have some fantastic leaders over the years, and that's a theme I'll come back to later on. But I'll pass over on that note.
Thank you very much, Tim. Really, really great overview. Yetunde, same question to you.
Right. Hi. I work in the civil service at the moment, and I've been a civil servant most of my career. But before joining the civil service, I qualified as a teacher, and I was a teacher as well. But I wanted to do something different, but which will still involve people. I mean, I think all jobs involve people, but I wanted to do something different. So I started to study HRM, human resource management, and I remember before I started studying human resource management, I was looking for jobs when I wanted to change from education into human resources. I applied for many jobs, but they didn't get through. There was one that I got through to the interview, and at the interview, I was told, okay, you're great, you're good, but you're not ready for HR, you don't have the experience. So I thought, okay, if I don't have the experience, you're not offering me the experience, where do you start? So that was the first hurdle that I had to cross. So I decided to go and study human resource management at that point and started to apply for jobs again. And I remember there was one day on my birthday, I attended about 3 job interviews. And that's because I knew then this is what I wanted to do. So that's, and I'm saying that now for people who are trying to get into HR or switch or, make that career transition. It might be difficult, but you need to persevere and, be very clear about what you want and keep going for it. So I used different avenues. I studied, and while I was studying, I got a job in the benefits office, as it was known then. Did that while studying. I was also looking for jobs in HR to get into HR. But I think for me, having that frontline experience of what the business does really helped me, and I could see a connection between the frontline service that I was working in, as well as the knowledge I was gaining through studying for my postgraduate diploma. And that helped me. So I started to look for jobs in HR. I got one, and I got in there. And I remember starting that job, doing that for about 6 months. And I thought, right, this is what I want to do. I'm going for promotion. And then, maybe now as not so much now, but then it was really difficult to get that promotion. And I remember, and I started thinking of different strategies. And I remember my line manager at the time told me, "Oh, I'm not ready yet." So I asked her, "What do I need to be ready?" So she told me I need to have like line management experience. Okay, so I thought, this was about many years ago. And I said, okay, if I don't have that, can we do a role reversal? So I put that forward. Let's reverse roles so that I'll be the line manager for a week, and you can, see my skills that way. So that's another method of, building experience. Look for opportunities, put yourself forward. Tim talked about breadth earlier on, and that's really important. And as my HR career experience began to grow, and I wanted more, so I started to look for more opportunities from being a generalist, like HR business partner. I wanted more than that. I did employment relations, recruitment, etc. And I remember there was a time in my career that I was ready for promotion, but there was no movement at the top. People were not leaving, and the new roles were not being created. And I thought, twice in my career, I've had to leave HR to go to the front line, gain experience of working with the business, with business leaders, operational leaders, the chief executive, and come back into HR on promotion. So that experience that I gained outside HR helped me to propel my career in that regard. On the second occasion, when I was doing employee relations, I wanted more, but again, there was no movement at the top and no opportunities for promotion at the time. So again, I left HR and I went to work at Department for Education as international relations. International research officer, international information research manager, to do that. And that came at a good time in my career, which I hadn't planned for, but it was an opportunity that I had to seize, because I'd just completed my master's in employment studies and HRM, which involved international studies of employment practices. And this job came up and I grabbed it. And in that job, I think it was one of the best jobs in my career, the best 4 years of my career, looking at things that affect employment. We talk about CIPD as a champion for better work and working lives, but that gave me that breadth of what happens before and after employment. So I'll stop there. The rest we will pick up later.
Thank you, Yetunde, and really great to see some themes, I think, coming out from you and Tim about getting that breadth of experience, about leaving HR and doing something else, and about that perseverance as well. Laura, can I come to you as a kind of midlife careers specialist? What would be your initial kind of opening remarks or tips on where to go, how to kind of make the move and develop your career further?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Katie. So I am a careers and in particular midlife career specialist. I do a portfolio of work, so including consulting, coaching and writing. I've been also in the HR profession for most of my career. So I've worked in 6 different industries. So rather than necessarily going outside of HR, I've worked in a whole variety of different industries, usually heading up L&D, or talent or organisation effectiveness. So in businesses like GSK, John Lewis Partnership, BAE Systems, Burberry, Aviva, lots of different companies. I'm going to just comment on midlife careers today, and there are a few things that you do really need to know. Midlife career, it kind of is actually becoming earlier now. So from kind of 35 onwards, and the clients that I work with range from 34 to 62. So just to give you a clue, it's quite a broad range. But there are a few things that you need to know. Firstly, research shows that it can be a uniquely challenging time in life, but around careers in particular, for several reasons, for three main reasons. So most people at this stage in your career have a lot going on. So there's a lot of expectations, you have a lot of roles, there's lots of people with needs from you, more so than you might have earlier or later in your career. The other thing is that you're essentially at the pivotal point in your own life. So you're between your youth and your old age, but also you're between generations, typically in your own family and also in organizations or in society. So you're kind of the linchpin that holds a lot of the society and the organization together. So there's a lot relying on you. But the main thing is that the changes that are happening to you and for you are multidirectional in nature. So at most of the times in your life, the trajectory is relatively positive, whereas in midlife, it's a whole mixture. So some of it's positive. So as you're moving forward, you're becoming wiser in terms of how you make decisions. But other things are typically perceived anyway to be on the decline. So things like your well-being, your health, your physical strength, your speed of processing, those sorts of things. So it's this complexity that makes it particularly challenging. And there are a few things to know that I found in my own research. So I did some research as part of my master's 2 years ago, and that forms the basis of my book. And there's a few things to know about how do you do this at this point. The first thing is not to get too hung up on changing what you do, because actually that's not the most important thing. So people who've changed from doing things like an IT consultant in Scotland to being a brewery owner in France, the biggest thing wasn't that they went from doing that to that, it was how they feel about their work. So how they relate to the work. They feel more liberated, more passionate, more engaged, more committed to what they're doing. They probably work a bit harder, if anything, but actually they feel really differently about how they relate to their work because they've got a sense of meaning behind it, which escalates radically in midlife. The second thing is not to be seduced to jumping to deciding too quickly. So not to lurch to the first opportunity that presents itself, to take the time that you need to get to know yourself again, because what you want and need at 30, 40, 50 is quite different to what it was when you were 20. So you have to really get to know yourself and what matters most to you now and spend a bit of time doing that. And the third thing is that the context, because you're in the midst of all this stuff that's going on, contextual readiness is really important. And a lot of people around you have an agenda about the choices that you make about your career. So they might want you to keep doing what you're doing for some reason. So they might have got used to your salary or your status or whatever it happens to be. And other people will be really strongly encouraging you to change because they get sick of you moaning about, you know, what's going on in your life. So it's quite difficult to get unbiased, challenging support. But it is worth persisting with. And the final thing I will say, and most people I work with completely resonates with, is that in midlife, or probably slightly broader, it is a dance with fear and confidence. Whether you know it or not, you are dancing with fear and confidence. And it's quite a complex dance. So sometimes fear is in the lead, sometimes confidence is in the lead, especially if you're transitioning and making a career move. It's quite fascinating because they can both create drive and impetus, but they can also keep you stuck. So you have to pay attention to what is going on. It's quite a dynamic dance. And the more you can learn from the reactions that you're having and the conversations and what that evokes for you, the better prepared you are to dance well. So I'll stop there, and obviously we can pick things up in the questions and hand back. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Laura. Really fascinating points there. And Louise, before I come on to people's questions, as a recruiter, what's the market like at the moment? Kind of make us feel better. It all seems a bit grim out there.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, no one can deny that the last 12 months have been probably. I've been at Badenoch Clark for 20 years, and I think the last year has been one of the most challenging that I've seen. But on a positive, there are positive signs. So this year, we've seen actually an unexpected rise. So if you compare this January to last January, we've actually had an increase of 20%. So if you compare like to like, the number of permanent and interim roles that we've had come in have actually been more in January this year than last year, which we weren't expecting, which I think is a really positive sign that, you know, the job flow is starting to slowly increase again. I think we've seen sort of a split between sort of 70% perm, 30% interim. And I think personally, the interim market probably will maintain sort of an upward trajectory this year as businesses sort of, you know, the ones that are maybe still uncertain or don't have the budget to recruit perm will look to recruit an interim. Also, some of our clients are recruiting interims for specific projects, or they need people in really quickly. And then you've got sort of the, you know, the sickness cover, the maternity cover. We've also seen clients come to us to recruit interims to cover people that are struggling to homeschool, and maybe they're about to lead on a mass redundancy project and they're looking, you know, they can't do both. So they've looked to increase interims in their team for that. In terms of sectors, so obviously I'm based in the Southeast. Aviation, hospitality's taken quite a big hit, but there are still lots of sectors that are buoyant. So half of our jobs have been within financial services, insurance, professional services, law firms, and then it's been sort of evenly split between the pharma, healthcare, technology sectors. And in terms of role types, I'd say sort of 60-65% of all of our roles have still heavily been within that sort of generalist, ER, HR operations, sort of HR advisory, business partnering kind of roles. And then we've also seen sort of a steady demand for reward specialists throughout. And then most recently, sort of the HR operations, shared service at the sort of manager and head of level, and also the L&D roles and the talent acquisition roles that, again, right at the start of the pandemic, sort of took a massive hit, have now starting to come back as clients obviously feeling that confidence in the market again to press on with their key hires, and recruitment is starting to increase again. So I mean, we feel quite positive that I think people were worried about lockdown 3, but I feel like it's had less of an impact versus lockdown 1 and 2. And we feel quite positive that hopefully this trend will continue in 2021. Fingers crossed.
Not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come to your questions because there's some really, really great ones coming in. So I'm not going to ask any of the ones that I wrote down and come straight to yours. Tim, I'm going to come to you on this first. Emma's asked, what advice would you give for growing your career or role within your existing company? So where do you find the opportunities to develop where you are?
Great question. Immediately understand your business, understand the organization that you work for. There's a phrase, isn't there? Are you working on the business or in the business? And all that means is, are you thinking about the strategy of the business, where the business needs to be in terms of to be successful? So in terms of the delivery of products and services, the vast majority of organizations who we represented on this call have been disrupted over the last almost 12 months, because it really 12 months, yes it is, quite enormously in terms of the way that they do business. So how have you got engaged with that, and how can you get engaged with that? Because that demonstrates that you're really committed to where the business is, the organization is continuing to change. So what does it mean to your digital strategy, for example? How has that changed in terms of the delivery of products and services? How's it changed in terms of how you focused on the health and well-being of your colleagues to sustain everyone through what I keep saying is a marathon of sprints? We have to keep picking ourselves up. We go like Billy Ho, then we sort of go right, and there's always the next project. So we have to keep sustaining everyone through this. How are you rethinking what this, for many organizations, the change in terms of not having people in the office means for the way that you bring people together, to find solutions to the different challenges that you have, to the way that it's changing access to talent? Because suddenly you don't need to find someone who's prepared to commute to that place. Wherever your office happens to be, that might mean that you can access different talent. It might be that you can plan things differently. And what so many professionals have demonstrated over these last 12 months is their understanding of how working capital flows through the business, and how they can best position cash. So in terms of a very cash focused place, which is where we are now in a largely recessionary environment, what that's meant for furlough, what's that meant for other salary reductions, for restructuring, for the way we've looked at professional fees, for non-permanent colleagues, or our approach to recruitment. There's been lots of examples of where people, professionals, have demonstrated how they can really support the organisation through this change. Now, not all are finding that they are shrinking or feeling that recession. There are many which are in completely different stages of growth at the moment. So how are you challenging that? Well, for those, Louise was talking about a couple of the sectors that have been horribly disrupted over last year, and there's fantastic talent that have come out of those sectors, and who we see on LinkedIn with the little green semicircle of open to work hashtag. Now, how could they transition to help you and be upskilled and move across? So there's so many ways that you can think about what's happening in your business right now. And you can, I keep coming back to this word, curious. Be curious, ask the questions, understand what's going on. And if you're asking the right questions, in so many cases, you'll leave that conversation with a new responsibility. So lean into that. Take the opportunity to learn, to make a difference, and enjoy it.
And I think that word curious is so important in so many of the discussions that I have with CPOs. That's kind of the number one thing that they're looking for. So thank you, Tim. Louise, we've got a couple of questions about job titles. How much does it matter about your job title? What if you feel your job title is actually holding you back, that it's not giving a fair reflection of your responsibilities, and it's actually getting you knocked back when you're applying for jobs or from recruiters?
Personally, I think this is quite a common theme. I get asked this question quite a lot. I don't really look at job titles when I'm looking at CVs, because job titles mean so different in different organizations. Like you could be a HR BP in one organization on 30k and in another organization on 90k. So it's our job as a recruiter, whether you're agency or internally, to actually look at the skills underneath the job title. And I think in general, people, like I certainly do, and make sure that my team does that. And I think the only challenge I think that probably you would have in terms of job title is when you're applying directly and it goes through a portal and it's a sort of a tick box exercise. But I certainly feel that if you came to a recruitment agency, or you had the opportunity to speak directly to an internal recruiter or an actual recruiting line manager, then I think it's quite the way to overcome that is just by making sure that on your CV, your skills and achievements are really clearly laid out. So it's, in the first couple of bullet points under your job title, I always say, write the first bullet point, just give me a summary of sort of your responsibilities. So just give me an idea of how many employees, for example, are in your company, how many you're responsible for in your client group, how many people you look after, how many people are in your team, across what locations, because that one bullet point will help people ascertain whether you're a HR business partner of looking after 20 people in the UK only firm, or 500 people across 5 locations across the world. So I think it's just making sure your CV is detailed as possible to help people ascertain that. But certainly for me, I don't tend to pay too much attention to the job title.
So maybe they're going to the wrong recruiters potentially.
Well, yeah, I think I think most people I talk to, most recruiting line managers understand that it's very different in terms of the companies that you've come from, and whether you're American or UK, some people are called HRD, CPO, VP. It's very varied. So you have to really just try and have conversations, isn't it? Which I know is hard, and I know it's hard to get action and get those conversations in the first place. But I think you can use your CV to really hone in on what you have done and try and get that bullet point right under the job title, so it's very clear for everyone to see.
Thank you. Yetunde, you mentioned some great experiences of line management and getting yourself that experience. I'm just going to put a couple of questions to you. First one is somebody asking, how do they get that line manager experience? They've been told they need it, but they don't have it. And following up from that, what advice would you give somebody who's just taken on their first line management role in the middle of the pandemic?
Okay, thanks, Katie. Now, line manager, the role of the line manager here is really key. I mean, line managers are busy people, but they're also interested in developing people so that they can deliver results for themselves, for the team. So they have a vested interest in your career. So what I would say is have a good relationship with your line manager. And I remember in the example I gave earlier on about gaining that experience, because I knew what I wanted. I had set when I went into the job, I set out my objectives for the line manager, what I was looking to do and how I can help. So it's always that question, how can I help you? How can I make life better for you? So it's a two-way street. So you have to give and take. So put yourself forward for things to help the team on one hand, but at the same time, make sure that you're doing things that matter for your career as well, and having that conversation with your line manager. What I found useful is having those career conversations with my line manager. Say, oh, this is what I want to do now. This is what I'm working on. This is where I'm struggling. And this is how I'm thinking of approaching it. So you're not only going to the line manager to say, I want this, but show that you have actually made that first step. And for me, that has helped. And that helped me to negotiate the role reversal that I mentioned earlier on in my career to gain that experience. As my career has advanced, I've kept those practices on and having those conversations with my manager to say, I would like to do this. And if I'm working on a project, before that project finishes, I'm looking at, okay, these are the things I want to do. I can tick off things, and wherever there is a gap, I'll mention to my manager, this is what I would like to do next. I think all of us, we've talked about having that breadth. So for me, using the CIPD HR professional map helped me to actually identify what I need to do next. So it's a tool that I would actively promote and encourage people to use, because that helps me. And in terms of these conversations and also moving forward, I was doing a project before that project finished, and I told my manager, these are the things I would like to do next. And between us and, talking to other people, having a good network, I found out opportunities and people invited me to come and work with them. And then I'll go to have that informational interview to find out what the role involves and whether it fits in with my own objectives. If it did, and then I'll go and take up the offer. And that has helped me throughout my career.
Thank you. Brilliant tips there. Laura, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the what do line managers do. So obviously my L&D world, I've done a lot around management development and did a 6-month assignment recently at BAE Systems to redo their first line manager program. And the one thing that you can Google search actually is Google did some really good research last year on what are the top 10 things that great people managers do and don't do. And interestingly, we found very similar results when we did the internal research within the organisation. The top two, just to give you a flavour, the first one is that the great line managers take the time to get to know the individual team members as individuals. So rather than doing the same thing with everybody in their team, they treat everybody as individual people. And the second thing is not micromanaging, which is a thing. But just to say, there's 2 of the 10 things, but it's a really nice list and there's a lot of research that's gone into it. So if you just search Google's top 10 things that great managers do.
Thank you. That's a really great tip. So I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but I've just lost it because there are so many questions coming in. So I'm going to come back to you. Tim, a specific question for you. You mentioned how valuable you found your international experience. What advice would you give on how do you find those international opportunities?
And of course, it's a really interesting time to ask that question, isn't it?
Yeah, Kim can't actually go anywhere.
Exactly. Yes. Thanks for that one. Okay. The opportunity that today's world gives us is the ability to work internationally without leaving your house, and the expectation from those who are recruiting into those roles that will be the case, that you don't have to have physically been somewhere. So again, within the organization that you're in now, if it's an international business, how do you go and find those? So years ago, I worked for Marks and Spencer, and Marks and Spencer has an international franchise department, so that would then set up the franchise stores internationally. So I asked if I could go and do an attachment to the franchise department. Rocket science, eh? And they were like, oh yeah, okay, well, not next week, but several months later, off I went and sort of spent some time with them, really open about how they did what they did, and were delighted that someone was interested. And that was in my 20s, and just finding someone who was prepared to give you some time. And then, guess what? The next time they've got a project that comes up, they know you. You've enlarged your network. You've lent in. I'm going to use that word again. You've shown your curiosity, and you've built that. Now, if you're in a UK-only organisation, for example, then there's so much great content out there, so much opportunity to learn from international businesses through panels such as these and podcasts and all the great stuff that we know, and then to build up your know-how. To use the CIPD resources. I'm a fellow of the CIPD, and have worked through all of my qualifications with the CIPD for years, and encourage my team and others to do the same. And again, to find those through your local groups or through different forums. Find people who are doing this. Build your network. What do we know? Louise will say exactly the same thing, which is, where are the majority of jobs found? They're found through pre-existing networks. And if the pre-existing networks don't work, then we go to the professions. That's the truth of it. So, to build that network is just so essential. And then go in there with, and my final point is, go in there with more humility than I showed.
It's a great.
When I moved to out to Australia, I had no idea what I was walking into, and thank goodness I had a boss and colleagues around me that had patience and that would explain the way things were to me, because the delta between what I knew and what I needed to know was so vast. So be prepared for an almighty learning experience if you do make that move in terms of role, or particularly if you make that international move yourself, for the way that it stretches you personally, professionally, your family life, everything. It really can take you to the edge. And I moved to a country where I was speaking the same language. But it is, you really have to be open to the learning experience it is. For those of us that have worked in global organizations for many years, we know that global moves fall over in the first 6 or so months. And if you can get someone through the first year, you're good. But that's when you normally have the wobble, because people don't realize the delta between what they knew and now what they're required to know.
Thank you, Tim. Laura, you mentioned that you've worked in lots of different sectors. We've got a few questions asking, when people are applying for jobs and they're told, to work in financial services, you really need to have worked in financial services or retail or hospitality or anywhere before. What advice can you give if you're an HR professional that wants to switch sectors?
Firstly, I've never found it to be a problem. I think that's part of the beauty of being in the HR profession, is that we do have transferable skills. And I think larger organisations that have functions, so like finance, HR, IT, are more used to kind of people moving around across different sectors. I've always just made a major of it being an advantage. So in the interview or on my CV, for example, I think once you've moved once, it makes it easier to do it again, so they know that you can move across sector. So in terms of getting a job in the first place, if you can emphasize, as Louise said, your transferable skills, so major on skills and types of experiences, rather than necessarily majoring on the sector or the one organization. I think the other thing that helps, I don't know if I should say this for those longer serving people, but I personally find it's easier if you move within 5 years or so. So if you do some of those moves relatively early, it shows that you're not, I think that people find it quite difficult if you've worked in the same company for 20 years to then believe that you're really committed to moving into a very different sector for whatever reason, or we'll find that an easy transition. So I think if you are earlier in your career, taking the opportunity to do it a little bit earlier is probably easier, and you'll generally get a little bit more support.
Thank you. Yeah, Louise.
Oh, I actually, that's great that Laura has a positive experience, but I do think that a lot of people, maybe at the more junior end, have a real challenge in terms of moving sectors, especially some sectors like financial services, law firm, professional services are quite strict in terms of, I don't know whether it's because when they come to recruitment agencies, obviously they're coming to us because they want a very specific brief and very specific skill set. But a few of my top tips, I think, for people looking to move sectors is that, you know, if you're really passionate about wanting to move from a law firm into a charity or vice versa, you know, if you're really passionate about that, then be really specific about that. So don't then apply for 5 jobs. So say for example, you want to get into a charity, then don't apply for 5 jobs within another law firm, because then that sort of dilutes what you're looking for. And I think, again, if you're really passionate about making a move into a different sector, is there a specific skill set that particular job needs? Is it a system skill? Because again, if you're going up against 5 people that maybe have that sector experience but don't have that specific skill or system knowledge that you have, then that could be your way in to getting in the door. And also, like what Tim was saying, it's about using your connections. So it could be that someone you worked with 2 years ago is actually a CEO of a charity, or you know, you can use them to write your recommendation on LinkedIn. Can they then even refer you into that company? Or, you know, they're going to be in a network where they're going to know what roles are coming up, so then can they utilize your network and connections, I think, is really key for that as well. And use your recruitment agency, because, you know, it's a lot easier for us to bring you to life, overcome barriers when we're speaking to hiring managers, rather than just sort of sending a CV blankly or coldly into a firm through an internal recruitment or a system, because we can then sell you and bring you to life and explain why you're looking and why you're passionate. And I think that often helps. So use us as well to be able to do that.
Thank you. Yetunde, you mentioned that you'd had a few times where you've gone out of HR and come back in, and we've got a few questions of people asking how to bridge that gap. So if they were an HR specialist that's now gone and done something else for a few years and they're finding it hard to get back into the profession, any tips on how you can come back if you've taken a bit of time out?
Okay, so I think for me, one, it was, I mentioned the reasons I wanted to do that. One initially was to get that promotion, but because there wasn't any movement, and having that plan of what I wanted to do. But again, relationships, it's really important to maintain good relationships, because I was having regular conversations with my line manager about what I wanted to do, what I was interested in. So when opportunities came, and I explained to them that, look, the only reason I'm going out is to gain this experience, and then I would still want to come back. So while I was away from HR, I still maintained those relationships. You know, we've talked about networking. So that's really important, having great relationships to do that. So when there were opportunities that came through, they will, in our chats, in our discussions, they'll mention, oh, something is happening here, or they're going to advertise a job, or this is happening. And that helps me to prepare for my return into HR. So it's understanding, one, your objectives, keeping the relationships, looking out for opportunities. And I think wherever I went, I would always make sure that you know, I use those transferable skills in those jobs outside HR, and that really helped me. And coming back into HR again, I use those transferable skills, but with more knowledge, better knowledge that gave me an edge over other people. That's what Louise mentioned earlier on about, you know, you're coming back with something different. So that really helps me to make that switch and then return.
Thank you. And Laura, just building on that, any advice on kind of how you sell it? Right. There's some amazing points from Yetunde there, kind of bringing it to life when if there's a few people who say they are struggling to get back to the profession.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Louise said, it's different experiences for different people. So obviously, some people are saying that they are struggling, so I'm believing them that they are struggling. But I think the clearer that you can be about what you bring, what you uniquely bring, and what you've, developing that really clear narrative. So whether it's a summary description on your CV to say these are my responsibilities, and I have 3 versions of a CV, so I don't know if other people do. So depending on what I'm doing, so if I'm going for an interim, which is an HR generalist interim, I have a very different version. It's the same jobs, it's the same experience. I'm just emphasising slightly different things in the role than if I'm going for, say, a talent management interim assignment. They're quite different. Or if I'm writing a biography, if I'm going to something about the book. I think it's really knowing your audience and targeting, what do they need to know? It's the same content, but it's just emphasising it and writing it really succinctly and sticking to the message.
Brilliant, great point there. I see people in the chat saying definitely something to do. Tim, do you have any advice on how to make the step into HR leadership roles? Obviously, you've been doing HR leadership roles a long time. I'm not commenting on your age, but, especially if you've got that kind of middle management experience, but the gap between manager and leader can be quite large. So, any advice on how you can demonstrate leadership ability and build it, maybe if you're not in a leadership role?
Yeah, I suppose there's, 3 immediate thoughts on that. One is that one thing that I've realized looking back at my career is that there are certain leaders who you work for and you're like, they're just amazing, absolutely, you'd walk over broken glass for them. And I pretty I started to realize that means that you will work for them for a limited period of time, because they will be going on to bigger and better things. And who knows, they might take you with them. But when you work for someone that you just go, wow, work out what it is that makes you go, wow. And you're going to have to turn into a vampire. You need to get that, understand what it is that they do that really, really energizes you. What knowledge do they have? What relationships do they have? What is it about the way they show up? What is it about their passion and energy? What is it about their curiosity? What is it about them that gets you going? Because you won't be the only one. And I guarantee you will have a limited window to do that. And that will then help you to work out the type of leader that you want to be and to take that. And if you have that type of leader and you have the appetite to progress, they will give you the opportunity. So I'm thinking about particularly my HR director, regional HR director, when I was out in Australia, and she was so generous with opportunities. When there was a board meeting and she was on leave, she would say, well, you go deputise for me. I think she was the only one of that exec who sent a deputy. Everybody else was on leave, they were just on leave. Or when there was a regional meeting in Hong Kong, I can remember saying, I think that'll be good for you, you go. And that generosity of great leaders is just fantastic. You find someone like that, you grab that opportunity with both hands because you're getting that exposure. But it's twofold, right? You've got to be prepared to step into that and to demonstrate that you'll work with them to grab those opportunities. And if you're not, you can find some of that inspiration elsewhere as well, because it might not be the person that you're seeking to learn from, might not be your direct leader, might be someone you can see over here. So, again, what is that, and how could you get to work with them on a project? What's their agenda? How can you support in it? And just think about the people that you tap into more broadly. Who do you follow on LinkedIn? Who do you follow on Twitter? I see a group of people here that you might want to follow at Tim Pointer, and just take that opportunity to connect in with people and go for that. The second point would be about learning. What do you learn? So first one was leaders. Second point is learning. How are you demonstrating your commitment to learning at the moment? just going back to the conversation that's just happened, I am astonished to this day at the number of people that I interview who haven't done their research about the organisation that I work for. Absolutely bonkers. You know, they're interested in the profession, but are you interested in the organisation? So where's your commitment to learning? What are you reading at the moment? This is not a stage. There are 2 books on my desk right now. What are the books that you're reading right now? You know, when someone asks you that question, how are you? I'm going to go and get Laura's book now. You know, how are you leaning into learning? And my final point, I went for 3 L's, is lifetime. Great book by Linda Grattan, co-authored by Linda Grattan, called The 100-Year-Old Life. Read that. Helps you really think about everything that you can achieve during your working life and your career, and the openness to different opportunities. You might think you're someone who's always going to work in permanent roles. I would like to challenge that perspective. Open yourself up to interim opportunities, to consultancy opportunities, to really flexing, to give yourself the most learning that you can in terms of progressing on. So those are my 3: leaders, learning, lifetime.
Brilliant. And that Linda Grattan book is brilliant. Yeah, Yetunde.
Fantastic, Tim. To build on what Tim said, about what are you learning, and also lifetime. I think if we were to look at all of this, we're talking of people at midlife now. We would have lots of experience with it, yet we will still have aspirations. But there may be sometimes when what you are doing at the moment is maybe limited. For example, if you're working on a project and you have that passion and that yearning to do more than your current role allows you for, there is an opportunity for you to learn and do things elsewhere. Opportunity to volunteer, so that the skills that you have do not become out of date. So for me, that's one of the things that inspired me to volunteer with the CIPD, because there were things I was doing in my work, in my day job, my paid job, where it's great, but I still had that yearning. I still had that yearning to do more, but the opportunities at work weren't there. So by volunteering with the CIPD, I was able to do more. I was able to learn more. I was able to connect more with people, expand my network, expand my, it's just amazing. So I wouldn't say to limit your learning, whatever you do, don't limit it to your work, your paid job only. There are opportunities out there that you can gain to improve in your paid job, also from your paid job to that as well. So it's really important, and I liked how you use that, the 3 L's, leader, learning, lifetime. Really important for people in midlife career.
We can all write those down and take them. I'm aware we are running out of time. I'm going to try and squeeze in as many more questions as I can. Louise, we've had a few on kind of using LinkedIn. Have you got any advice on how to get the most out of it? Is it appropriate for people to direct message cold people like you? How do you feel when people do that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's such a powerful tool, and I think if you use it right, then it's amazing. And I think sort of I know we're running out of time, so I'll try and keep it brief, but sort of top tips would be: make sure you've got a appropriate photo, make sure that your skills are up to date and mirror your CV. I think make sure that ask for as many recommendations and get as many recommendations as you can on there, because I think that's the first thing that, as a recruiter and internal recruiters, we would, I receive a CV. If I did receive a cold CV or a cold message, the first thing I would do is look at the profile. So you want to make sure that's as marketable as possible. And also, make sure that your personal brand across all of the social medias is that consistent message. So I think you can Google yourself, and then you can make sure that the message and the brand is consistent. You can set up Google alerts as well, so whenever anyone mentions you, you can get an alert. So I think, for example, when it depends on how sufficient and proficient you are at using LinkedIn, but it can be so powerful. And I think if you are looking for roles, I think you can set the status to open to work and open for opportunities. You can be as open and transparent as to post on there that you are open, and ask for help and ask for recommendations and get your profile shared. And I think if you can spend and commit to maybe 5-10 minutes each day of LinkedIn, looking, like Tim was saying, if you can connect with the industry professionals and the people that you want to be connecting with, and comments and share industry knowledge, share your thoughts on what they've written. You know, it's just all of that will increase your visibility and get you noticed at the end of the day. And I think it's a really and certainly for recruiters, you know, I always make sure that I respond to people that message me, and if I can't help, then I'll recommend them or forward them on. So it's such a powerful networking, and it's something that if you have been made redundant or you are out of work at the moment, it's something that I would be committing to sort of spending 10 minutes a day, just making sure that that's up to date, and you're constantly sort of commenting and liking and getting traction on your profile. So yeah, I think it's really, really powerful.
Thank you. Laura, somebody asked, I'm being made redundant. I'm at a crossroads as whether to persevere with a career in HR or do something completely different. What advice would you give around changing careers? This is bearing in mind we've only got about 5 minutes left.
No problem. I mean, if you can take some time to really rethink, even if you deliberately choose, the making a deliberate choice is the most important thing. Even if you deliberately choose to continue with HR, great. If you deliberately choose to do something else and to pivot in a different direction, great. But the main thing I'd say about deciding between those different routes, making those choices, is it's an inside-out process and an outside-in process. So what matters most to me? What are my values? What are my strengths? And outside, what's going on? What's available? What matters in my world, my context? And those two things, and taking a bit of time to think a bit differently, think afresh, is really useful.
Thank you. And then I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm going to ask you all for one top tip. But this is a little bit self-indulgent, being as I work at the CIPD, but a few people are asking, how valuable are CIPD qualifications? And please answer honestly, but Yetunde, what would you say is the value in being qualified?
I think as a HR practitioner, what I found useful about the CIPD qualifications is that you're bringing with you the knowledge, so you understand the context why some things happen in HR, rather than just having the experience. So the qualification will give you that knowledge, so you understand the reason why you have to do some things and why you have to stay away from some things. So it gives you that knowledge and also the confidence in making any decisions, because whatever decision you make would be evidence-based, you know, so it's important to have that knowledge. So the qualification for me, I think is key.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, is it something you encourage in your teams as well as yourself? I know you're.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, Tim?
Absolutely. But I would say that context is queen. And I go back to you. Are you a business person? Do you understand the organization that you work in? Because that context is so important. CIPD, as I said, I'm FCIPD. Don't myself, encourage it in my team. It's not the only source that's out there, and your broader learning is so important. Commit yourself to learning, and it's incredibly rewarding, and it really helps you to progress, because it will broaden your ability to understand the context for why you're enacting that technical understanding, and to talk to people who don't know what you're talking about if you speak HR.
Thank you. Checks in the post, both of you. Before I come to a close, I'd just like to very quickly ask everybody for one key takeaway that you'd like people watching this to take away from this session. And Louise, I will start with you. And sometimes it's easiest going first.
It's really, I think in brief, I think be patient, be persistent, and stay positive. I think it's really hard. I understand it's really hard times, really hard market, but I think, you know, you could go for 1, 2, 3 interviews before, you know, people are very unlikely to find that dream role in the first interview they go to. So I just think keep going, keep using your networks, using people like myself, and just asking for advice. And, you know, one thing I didn't mention earlier is the mentoring as well. You know, there's no harm in asking for someone to mentor you. I think it's really flattering. So I think, yeah, just keep going. You will find your dream job. There is a job out there for everyone.
Thank you. Laura?
I think the slightly complementary perspective is around learning how to be yourself with skill. So I think, you know, in terms of progressing within an organisation or moving into another organisation, being true to yourself is much easier than if you're trying to pretend to be someone else. But remember that you need to be yourself with skill. So it's not about being, you know, warts and all, this is me, love me or hate me. That's not actually very helpful for you or for other people. Learn to be yourself with skill.
I love that. Yetunde. Oh, you're on mute. We almost
I think for me it's about trusting the skills that you have and finding out, you know, what makes you unique, and how do you sell that to if you like your next employer. And if you don't have HR experience, those skills will come in handy there. But again, it's about being curious, ask questions, learn, and network, mentoring. For example, I have a sponsor and a reverse mentor, which works well for me to understand not only what I'm doing, but, you know, understand what's happening elsewhere and how my mentee, who's a senior manager or director, is feeling, you know, so that helps me. So have a mentor, have a sponsor, network, be curious to learn, trust your skills. The positive, so the outlook is positive.
Brilliant. And Tim, last but not least.
Everything that they said. I would just go back to be a business person with strong technical know-how, focus on context, commit yourself to being inspired and connecting to great leaders, to a lifetime of learning, and to thinking about your career through what I hope for all of us is a long and happy life, even though we've been through a very difficult year. And, you know, find enjoyment in your work. We are very fortunate. We are in a fascinating profession, and it's never dull.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm afraid we are out of time. In fact, I've run over by 1 minute, so sorry about that. Thanks so much to our wonderful panel, Yetunde, Laura, Louise, and Tim. Thank you all for your questions, and it's been really, really great to see you chatting to each other as well, and sharing and helping each other. Just a reminder, as I said at the beginning, that this is part of a series on building your career in 2021. We'll be back on the 8th of February with a session looking at some of the various career paths available in the people profession. So whether that's going kind of HR corporate route, becoming self-employed, looking at interim opportunities. So I can hope you can join us there, because we have a really, really great panel on that lunchtime as well. But that is it from us for now. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.